This is part 2 of Japanese pitch accent and i-adjectives. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, please check out the video first. The link in the description. As I mentioned in part 1, the pronunciation of i-adjectives has been changing. More and more people now pronounce traditionally flat type adjectives as down-step type adjectives. In part 1, I covered the traditional pronunciation of i-adjectives. In this video, I'm going to cover the new pronunciation of i-adjectives. In the traditional pronunciation, you have to identify if an i-adjective is a down-step type or a flat type. But in the new pronunciation, you don't have to, because all of them are down-step type in the dictionary form. This is one of the advantages of learning the new pronunciation. Not only that, if you compare the conjugated forms in both traditional and the new pronunciations, you can see the new one is a lot simpler. But to memorize the accented mora for these two forms, you need to know if an i-adjective is an originally flat type adjective or not in either way. So for those who choose to learn the new pronunciation, I recommend you think of originally flat type adjectives as exceptions, because they only account for less than 15% of all the i-adjectives. Only 36 entries on OJAD to be exact. Keep in mind though, I personally pronounce these two forms as down-step type too. For example, I sometimes pronounce 赤い時計 as 赤い時計. Also, I sometimes pronounce 赤く as 赤く. So I think it's unnecessary to memorize these two forms as flat type, considering the convenience. But it's irresponsible for me to say, I do it, so you do it, isn't it? Even though I'm a native speaker. So what I introduce in this video is a more orthodox new pronunciation of i-adjectives. Alright, as I said, in the new pronunciation, you don't even need to worry about if an i-adjective is a down-step type or a flat type, because all of them are down-step type in the dictionary form. With that in mind, what you want to know next is the pronunciation of each conjugated form, right? So let's learn about which mora is accented when an i-adjective turns into different forms in the new pronunciation. First, let's take a look at the polite form. In the polite form, the accent falls on the mora before i. For example, 白い turns into 白いです. 赤い turns into 赤いです. As I said, the accent falls on the mora before i. 白いです. 赤いです. Next, let's take a look at the form in which an i-adjective modifies a noun. In this form, the accent also falls on the mora before i. For example, 白い. The accent falls on the mora before i. And when it modifies a noun 時計, it becomes 白い時計. When an originally flat type adjective like 赤い modifies a noun, it becomes unaccented. For example, when it modifies 時計, it becomes 赤い時計, 白い時計, 赤い時計. Next, let's take a look at the adverbial form. In this form, the accent falls on the mora before く. For example, 白い turns into 白く, and the accent falls on ろ. 白く. When an originally flat type adjective like 赤い turns into the adverbial form, it becomes unaccented. 赤く. Next, let's take a look at the て form. In the て form, the accent falls on the mora before く. For example, 白い turns into 白くて. So the accent falls on ろ. 白くて. And 赤い turns into 赤くて. So the accent falls on か. 赤くて. Lastly, let's take a look at the past tense affirmative form. In this form, the accent falls on the mora before か. For example, 白い turns into 白かった. So the accent falls on ろ. 白かった. And 赤い turns into 赤かった. So the accent falls on the first か. 赤かった. Here's the summary.